Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my lair. I have a horrifying episode for you this evening. Our first guest is the notorious Dr. Andrew Jakubowicz, and he's here to talk to us about how we can use some of the theories and practices that surround the oppression of migrants to broaden out that sense of oppression to include everybody so that I can rule the world. We'll have that interview for you right after these subliminal messages.
Hold your arm there, right there.
See that?
Okay, so we've got one side looking fabulous.
You start to see the fats coming through the tube. If you remove these,
Here, here's the blood supply to it. Superficial enough.
I'm sucking what is known as the double chin.
There's the belly button.
This is going to be removed.
Both sides are done. We've got both. Here's our midline.
You can remove that.
Really smoothly with it.
Good evening.
Great to be with you, Subi.
Right. Well, if we wanted to set the national agenda, particularly, towards, in my personal preference, minorities like superheroes, British spies, how would I construct that conversation on a national and an international level?
That's a really, really good question. We've had some spies who have been acceptable minorities, and we've had spies who are uncomfortable with it. So, for instance, when the former Howard government decided it would rewrite Australia's history curriculum for high schools, it chose a super spy as the only post-1950 non-British person to identify in that curriculum. So I think it's really important to understand that for Australians of conservative bent, who are superhero, super spy oriented, most of their heroes, in fact, will be British. Some of them will be Anglo-Aussie, and occasionally, as was in this case, they'll be Russian.
Right, so what was the context in which a Russian spy could be seen to aid the Australian curriculum? Is it a critique?
No, it's not so much a critique. It was, in the 1950s, Australia was deeply embedded in the Cold War. The Labor Party was being ripped apart, what's new, by conflict over core values, what's new. And in that case, it was the core values of Catholicism versus socialism inside the Labor Party. And the Conservatives, led by Robert Menzies, saw an opportunity to embed themselves politically for a long time to come. They were very successful because there was another 15 years of unbroken Conservative rule that happened. And they decided that there was a conspiracy afoot inside the Australian government to feed secrets to the Soviet Union. And one of the people who was doing this was a Soviet agent in Canberra. And they got him to defect. And with his defection, everything sort of erupted. And so he became, in a sense, a sort of heroic example of what you have to do if you're a migrant to embed yourself in the Australian political culture.
And that comes with a distancing or outright rejection of the culture you've emerged from?
Well, you've got to basically walk away from that, and you've basically got to say whatever Australia says goes, no matter how corrupt, how criminal or anything else, because it's my country now.
Mm. So back to this idea of assembling a toolkit to create this image. So we have, let's not use the British super spy because it's going to be difficult to alienate them from the audience. So let's take the case of mutants, these self-righteous mutants that are constantly attacking my lab. How do we create a narrative? We know that perhaps they're not like us. That's a good starting point.
Well, firstly, what you've got to do is you've got to get a group of mutants together, right? And you've got to get them, and you've got to shoot them with very long lens, right? And they've got to be cowering in some way,
Right.
And then, just as you think you've stopped them, they grab all their little mutant children. Right? I don't think they're children. Mutants have children? I don't think they
Underlings.
Underlings? No, they're sort of growths. Okay. So they rip the growths off them and throw them out of the train. Right?
Right.
And their idea is it'll stop the train because people like us will be so careful and so caring about these little mutant growths being bowled along next to the train that they'll stop the train and save the mutant growths, and the mutants will get off and they'll do us. Right? So what we've got to do is set all that up, and then we say, we're going to let the train run, and then we grab the train and we turn it around and we put it in an orange sausage, and we put it on one of those things.
Yeah, right. Manual for the train rail.
Right. And then we get a whole bunch of Aussie lifesavers hanging onto the truck things, and then we pump until we're almost back at the border of mutant land, right? And then we just push it across the border into mutant land.
Yeah, excellent.
And if it tries to come back, we shoot it.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this is standard procedure these days, is it not?
Well, we don't know because standard operating procedure at sea, which is the only example we've got, we're not allowed to know about.
That is a pity.
So we've got to guess.
Well, thank you very much for that. We'll be back with Andrew Jakubowicz after the break.
Play yourself. Just try to eat some whipped cream. Oh yeah. About half is left.
We're going to come to my favourite section of the show, Lizard Watch. This is where we look at conspiracy theories, conspiracy facts, and try and see how they relate to our guests' respective fields. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, who are the vested interests against multiculturalism, and what do they have to gain?
You call this Lizard Watch?
Yeah, this is Lizard Watch.
Now, do you know who the lizard was?
Who the main lizard?
The main lizard was.
Well, I'm going from David Icke, and he is all Queen Elizabeth is a lizard, bloodlines of the British aristocracy. And so, I mean, do you know of another lizard? Because you should report all lizards to me.
About 15 years ago, there was this guy called Kerry Packer.
Right? I've heard that.
And he was known as the lizard. And there was this big event which was called the Bottom of the Harbour Scheme, where a whole bunch of, it's a bit like Kids Overboard, but a whole bunch of really quite corrupt business dealings, which of course doesn't happen anymore, but at that time there was a whole bunch of corrupt business dealings between government and private enterprise. And one of the characters in there was given the code name Lizard. And rumour went around, more than rumour, that it was him.
Wow.
It was actually him.
Well, we got another one of the big lizards down on our list today. That's a quite
I think it's
achievement of the Lizard Watch.
Well, I think it's important to understand. But on the other hand, I think lizards are really malign creatures. Like on the weekend, I was out walking the dog, and I bumped into this couple, and this guy was walking his bearded dragon down the dog.
Yeah, right.
And I said, look, you've got to watch it, there are lots of dogs around here. He said, yeah, it's okay, because he had this bearded dragon on his chest, right? He said, yeah, she's not going to go anywhere, right? I mean, if I put her down, she'd run away. But if I just keep it close to my chest, because it's a bit cold, she stays warm. And I think that's really nice, that lizards huddle up to people to stay warm. And we keep them alive, and they keep us human by being lizards. And I think that's a really interesting sort of, what would you call it, a sort of,
cohabitation?
Well, it's more than that. It's sort of like a symbiotic embeddedness.
Well, that's certainly what the lizards are trying to achieve.
I did it down a dog park on Sunday.
The other question I wanted to know is sort of the other side. Who are the vested interests who have to gain from the acceptance of multiculturalism in purely economic and political terms, as opposed to, rights?
Right. Yeah. Well, there's all these sort of cosmopolitans, right? I work in a research centre called Cosmopolitan Civil Society, so I guess we do, right? We're very big on cosmopolitans.
So that would be government grants that you're siphoning.
No, not necessarily. Like when I was a kid, there was this cafe called the Cosmopolitan I used to hang out at.
Right.
And the interesting thing about it was it had the best cheesecake in Sydney. So the people who are into cheesecake have got a great deal to gain from multiculturalism and cosmopolitanism. I think there's a lot there, because if you haven't got that, what you've got is Sayo biscuits and Philadelphia cream cheese, and that's really sick. Whereas if you go to the Cosmopolitan, you've got something much richer, much more broad and beautiful. Like, I remember once talking about, I was at fish markets with some television crew, and we were chatting about fish. No, we were talking about politics. And I was asked to describe the difference between conservative monoculturalists and multiculturalists. And we happened to be passing the leather jacket sort of store in the fish market. I said, look, leather jackets are great fish, right? It's difficult to peel, right? It's nice grilled, it's all right, but you wouldn't want to eat it all the time, right? And next to it was this fantastic fresh marinara, right, full of all sorts of things. I said, now look, you could live on marinara and have a different taste every day of the week and still be fully nourished. You try to do that with leather jacket and you get sick of it. That's the difference between John Howard's leather jacket monoculturalism and multiculturalism.
It's such a succinct way of putting it.
Well, it's gutsy.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming down today, Professor Jakubowicz, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Actually, do you have something out at the moment that you would like our audience to take a look at, if they can?
Well, if I did, I'd have it, but I don't, so I can't. But my latest book is called For Those Who Come Across the Seas, and it's a collection of stories about different aspects of Australian society made up around the people who come to Australia from all over the world. And coming soon, in June, is my next documentary called Once Upon a Time in Punchbowl, where we get beneath the surface, a sort of falafel underbelly, which explores the sort of dynamics of Western Sydney.
Excellent. Okay, and we'll put all those links in the About section for our viewers. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Dr. Supernova, it's been a pleasure.
What a fantastic way to wrap the series. If you liked this show, please like the videos, leave us a comment, or go to our website, www.gymcrack.com.au, and you can write in the forums, you can read articles written by my brother, Felix Supernova. He's a lot less evil than me, so it's a very different tone. But thank you so much for staying evil yourselves and continuing to watch this program. Until next season, stay evil.